The first time she said it, her voice didn't sound angry. It sounded tired. "Why do you keep avoiding me?" my friend's mom asked, standing in the narrow hallway as if she'd been waiting there all along. I froze with my keys halfway to the door, my heart slamming so hard I was sure she could hear it. In that second, every reason I had spent years running, crossing streets to avoid her, pretending not to notice her calls, all of it came rushing back. I had always believed that if I just stayed silent long enough, the truth would stay buried. I was wrong. Because sometimes the past doesn't knock, it corners you and refuses to let you leave until you face it. I had known her family since childhood. Her son, Ayan, was my closest friend growing up. We shared lunches, secrets, and dreams we thought would never fade. His mother, Mrs. Rahman, was the kind of woman everyone trusted without effort. She remembered birthdays, fed half the neighborhood, and listened in a way that made you feel seen. When my own parents were too busy fighting or working double shifts, her house felt like a refuge. That was part of the problem. When something terrible happened years ago, something that broke more than just one heart, it was easier to disappear than to look into her eyes and see the disappointment I imagined living there. After Ayan moved abroad for studies, life pulled us all in different directions. I stayed back, juggling responsibilities I never felt ready for. Mrs. Rahman would call occasionally, ask how I was doing, invite me over for tea. I always had an excuse. Too busy. Not feeling well. Maybe next time. Each lie stacked on top of the last until avoiding her became a habit, almost a reflex. But habits built on fear don't protect you forever. That evening, when she finally stopped me in the hallway of our apartment building, I saw something I hadn't expected. There was no accusation in her eyes, no anger. Just confusion mixed with concern. "Did I do something to hurt you?" she asked softly. That question hit harder than any blame could have. I mumbled something about work and stress, but she didn't move aside. She simply said, "Come tomorrow. Just for tea. I miss talking to you." And for the first time, running felt heavier than staying. The next day, as I walked to her house, my steps slowed with every memory. I remembered the night Ayan and I had argued, the harsh words I'd thrown without thinking, the accident that followed hours later, and the guilt that wrapped itself around my chest ever since. Ayan survived, but our friendship didn't. He left with silence between us, and I stayed with the belief that his mother must know, must blame me, even if she never said it. That belief had grown into a wall I hid behind for years. When Mrs. Rahman opened the door, the smell of familiar spices and tea filled the air. It felt like stepping into a memory I didn't deserve. We sat across from each other, and for a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then she looked straight at me and said, "You know, avoiding someone doesn't erase pain. It just makes it lonely." Her words cracked something open inside me. Before I could stop myself, tears spilled out. The story I had rehearsed in my head for years finally came pouring out, my guilt, my fear, my belief that she must hate me for what happened to her son. She listened without interrupting, the same way she always had. When I finished, my chest felt hollow, like I had emptied everything I was carrying. I waited for her reaction, bracing myself for anger. Instead, she reached across the table and held my hand. "I lost many nights of sleep worrying about you," she said. "Not because I blame you, but because I could see you disappearing. Ayan made his choices, and so did you. Life happened in between. But you don't have to punish yourself forever." That moment should have been the end of it, but healing rarely happens all at once. The second hook came weeks later, when a message appeared on my phone late at night: Ayan was coming back home. My heart raced, and old fears resurfaced. I considered slipping back into avoidance, canceling visits, returning to silence. But Mrs. Rahman's words echoed in my mind. Avoiding doesn't erase pain. It just makes it lonely. When Ayan finally stood in front of me, older and more distant than I remembered. The air felt heavy again. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he surprised me by saying, "Amy told me everything." My stomach dropped. "She told me how you've been blaming yourself all these years," he continued. "And how you kept away because you thought you didn't deserve us." His voice wasn't angry. It was calm, almost sad. We talked for hours that night, about misunderstandings, about pride, about how silence can turn small wounds into permanent scars. He admitted he had carried his own version of the story, believing I didn't care enough to stay. We both realized how wrong we had been, trapped in our own guilt and assumptions. In the days that followed, something shifted. I started visiting Mrs. Ramon regularly, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. Each visit felt lighter than the last. The weight I had carried for years didn't disappear overnight, but it slowly loosened its grip. I learned that facing the people we avoid is often less painful than living with the stories we create in our heads. One evening, as I was leaving her house, Mrs. Ramon smiled and said, "I'm glad you stopped running." I smiled back, realizing how much I had missed by staying away, not just her tea or her kindness, but the chance to heal. The truth is, avoidance feels safe until you realize it's stealing your present to protect you from your past. When someone asks, "Why do you keep avoiding me?" they might not be accusing you. They might be inviting you back into a place where understanding and forgiveness are still possible. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do isn't running ahead, it's turning around, facing the pain, and allowing yourself to come home. The night before Ayan returned, sleep refused to come. I kept replaying his mother's words in my head, wondering if forgiveness spoken so gently could really survive a face-to-face meeting with the past. Just before dawn, my phone vibrated with a single message from an unknown number, "I'm back." Those 2 words were enough to make my chest tighten. In that moment, I understood something frightening. Avoiding his mother had only been practice. Facing him would be the real test, the moment that could either finally free me or break me all over again. When we met, it wasn't dramatic at first. No shouting, no sudden tears. Just 2 people sitting across from each other, carrying years of silence between them like an invisible wall. He looked different, older, calmer, but his eyes still held the same depth I remembered. For a while, we talked about ordinary things, travel, work, how strange it felt to be back home. But beneath every sentence, something heavier waited to be spoken. Finally, he leaned back and said quietly, "Why didn't you ever come see Amy?" The question wasn't sharp, but it cut deep. I realized then that avoidance doesn't only hurt the person you run from, it reshapes how others see your absence. I told him the truth, the same truth I had confessed to his mother. How guilt had convinced me I was no longer welcome. How fear had whispered that my presence would only reopen wounds. As I spoke, I expected his expression to harden. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, like someone finally putting down a burden. "I thought you didn't care," he admitted. "I told myself you moved on, that our friendship didn't mean as much to you as it did to me." That was when I realized how powerful silence can be. It tells stories even louder than words, and not always the right ones. The days that followed were awkward but honest. There were moments when laughter returned unexpectedly, and moments when old pain surfaced without warning. But something was different this time. We didn't run from the discomfort. We sat with it. Mrs. Ramon watched us from a distance at first, careful not to interfere, but her relief was obvious. One afternoon, as the 3 of us shared tea together, she said softly, "Life is too short to live inside misunderstandings." No one replied, but we all knew she was right. Healing didn't come as a single emotional breakthrough. It came in small, ordinary moments, walking together through familiar streets, sharing meals, remembering things without flinching. Each moment chipped away at the fear that had once controlled me. I started to understand that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, it's about refusing to let the past decide who you are allowed to be in the present. One evening, as I prepared to leave, Ayan stopped me at the door. Next time, he said, don't disappear. Even if things get uncomfortable. I nodded, knowing how close I had come to losing something irreplaceable simply because I was afraid to face a conversation. Outside, the air felt lighter than it had in years. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was no longer hiding. Looking back, I understand now that when his mother asked, "Why do you keep avoiding me?" she wasn't demanding an explanation. She was offering a bridge. Avoidance feels like control, but it's actually surrender, to fear, to guilt, to stories we never bother to verify. Facing her taught me that the people who care about us often don't need perfection, they need honesty. And sometimes, the moment you stop running is the moment life finally gives you back everything you thought you had lost, and here is the truth that stayed with me long after everything settled: the people who ask why you are avoiding them are rarely trying to pull you into pain, they are trying to pull you out of it. I spent years hiding, thinking distance would protect everyone, when all it really did was turn love into doubt and memories into regret. The moment I stopped running, I didn't lose myself the way I feared. I found myself again, standing exactly where I should have been all along. If there is someone in your life you keep avoiding, ask yourself this: what if they are not waiting to judge you, but waiting to understand you? Silence feels safe, but it slowly steals your chance to heal. Courage doesn't always look like big speeches or dramatic apologies. Sometimes, it looks like answering a question you've been afraid of: why do you keep avoiding me? Because on the other side of that question might be forgiveness, peace, and a second chance you didn't know was still yours.